Hello, Bronx friends and neighbors, and welcome to Bronx Talk. The baseball season has just begun, and in the Bronx, of course, that means more traffic and people around our stadium at 161st Street. But it also means the thrill of a child walking onto the grandstand for the first time and seeing that green, huge field shining like a huge emerald in the summer sun. And for us older folks, floods of memories of the national pastime of our youth. And of course, for everyone, it means maybe an extra hot dog and beer or two, as well as the joy of a big win. And yes, the agony of a difficult loss. It is, after all, 1, 2, 3 strikes, and you're out at the old ball game. So anyway, on this edition of Bronx Talk, we're thrilled to have two of the foremost baseball experts to review the Yankees, the Mets, the new ABS system, and much more in Major League Baseball. Please join me in welcoming a Bronx boy, a longtime friend of mine, who's an official scorer for Major League Baseball, a SiriusXM update anchor, and the author of this book, Yankees Essential, and many other books about baseball, my buddy Howie Karpin. Always nice to have you with us.
Yeah, it's about time we're live. We've been on Zoom calls for the past 6 years.
There you go. Well, the pandemic had something to do with that. And coming to us virtually, a sports writer and best-selling baseball author of this fabulous new book called Make Me Commissioner, as well as books about Sandy Koufax, Mickey Mantle, and Babe Ruth, little players like that. We're thrilled to have Jane Leavy with us. Jane, nice to have you with us. We didn't hear her just then, folks, so I'm just letting the guys upstairs know that. Howie, and then we'll add Jane in there as well. Before we get to analysis of the Mets and Yankees, you know, what happens on opening day is baseball fans like myself, we wait and wait and wait, and then all of a sudden it's opening day, and we try to make judgments about the first 4 games. Both the Mets and Yankees are 3-1. What can you reasonably judge from the first 4 games? Or, quite honestly, and we'll ask Jane the same question, quite honestly, is there nothing to judge from these first 4 games? Because, you know, you can win for a week and still have a crappy season, or you can lose for a week and have a great season.
Well, we live in the age of overreaction, and old-time baseball, you know, people who followed the sport a long time are really going to tell you that you can't really assess what the teams are going to be like at that point, 4 games in. You got to give it a little time, maybe 30, 40 games to get a real gauge of how the teams are going to be. But you're excited about the new names, how they're going to fit in, you know, maybe some trends that from last year, you want to see them reverse some of those negative trends early on because things can be established in April and March. So it's really hard to get a real gauge of what the teams are going to be down the road in August and September. But we get excited about, you know, seeing certain signs and things that tell us maybe what these teams will, what kind of seasons they will have.
So let's start with our Bronx Yankees. Before we get even into specifics, were you surprised that they largely stood pat over the offseason?
No, not really. You know, their pitching looks like it's going to be pretty dynamic if they stay healthy. They've got some nice young arms mixed in with some of the veterans. I thought maybe that, you know, they may have made a mistake bringing Trent Grisham back. That's just a personal opinion. His track record has shown that he wasn't really that kind of player that he produced at a clip that he did last season. I thought the Yankees should have maybe given Jason Dominguez a little bit more of a shot. You know, obviously that didn't come to pass. You know, so he's been sent down to the minors. Aaron Judge is going to be Aaron Judge. I mean, people are overreacting that he's off to a slow start. They forget he got off to a slow start a couple of years ago and still won the MVP. So I like the fact they brought Cody Bellinger back. I think their lineup can show some balance. I expect Austin Wells to be a little better. I thought he got caught up too much with his defense. He's a better hitter than he's shown. I don't know if Ryan McMahon's going to hit a whole lot. Jazz Chisholm can be an exciting player, and Ben Rice has turned out to be better than they expected. So they have the makings of a real good team. You know, whether it translates, the bullpen is a little question mark. Whether those things translate into a good season, they won 94 games last year.
How important is Garrett Cole to have to come back? Obviously, if you have it, it's great. Do you see that as an essential component to what they need to have happen?
Oh, absolutely. He's going to be a big lift when he does come back in the rotation. It gives them depth. And that, you put him in with Cam Schlittler and with Max Fried. That's a pretty dynamic three right off the top.
Do you have hesitation about his health, about Cole's health at this point?
A little bit. You have to, coming off Tommy John surgery. But, it's shown in the past that the surgeries have been successful and players have come back and they've become a semblance of what they once were. Cole's, a guy who's kept himself in shape. He looked good in the spring, the outings he had. So I'm optimistic that he'll return to some sort of form.
If you were the general manager, and we all play general manager, and you say everybody does it now, of course we all do it, there's so much information out there. If you were playing general manager coming into this offseason, would you have looked for something? Or do you feel that, yeah, they did okay with what they have, and they developed it, and now expecting a lot of people to have better years?
Well, I just said Ryan McMahon. We don't know if he's going to hit.
Good point.
He's a great fielder. I maybe would have taken a shot on Alex Bregman. I think it would have been a nice fit for the Yankees, a right-handed bat that they were looking for, and a solid third baseman and a winner. I thought that was a move that they should have made. That's just my opinion. But right now, this is the team they have. Anthony Volpe's going to come back. I don't know about him as an everyday player. He has to answer a lot of questions. He has a lot to prove when he gets back in the lineup.
Do we have Jane Leavy back? That would be great
so.
if you do. There we go. Hi, Jane. There we go. Now we see you. So I don't know if you heard some of the things Howie was saying. Your thoughts about the Yankees at this point? Did they need anything, or are they in good shape and ready to go and have a playoff and maybe even more season?
This is really cynical, so bear with me, but, what the hell. Maybe the calculus was nobody expected Trent Grisham to take that $22 million offer. I don't know why they wouldn't expect him to take it. Everybody seems surprised that they offered it and surprised that he took it. I mean, what was he making last year, like $6 million? Yeah, he was a good defensive player. He hit out of his mind last year, but there's no precedent for him repeating it. I agree that they should, the Yankees tend to develop kids and then they leave them in the minor leagues. And by the time they decide to trade them, they're not worth anything anymore. I don't understand that. I would bet, here's my guess, that George Lombard will be the everyday third baseman by the middle of the season.
Wow. Well, somebody mark that down because you're now on the record for saying that.
I'm on the record.
I want to talk about Aaron Judge for a moment. He had 2 homers in his 13 at-bats so far, including one that hit off an ambulance, apparently. And but he does have 7 Ks. And, how do we see that? And maybe we start with you on that, Jane. This is the game of baseball right now where they'll accept the home runs and they'll accept the Ks.
You can't pick anything out of it. Cal Raleigh, who lost the MVP to him, he's the catcher for Seattle, and he drove in the winning run last night to beat the Yankees in Seattle, where everybody's like, oh, why are they booing Aaron Judge? It doesn't seem nice. They're booing him because Aaron Judge got the MVP over Cal Raleigh.
Right.
Cal Raleigh had struck out 10 times or something in his first couple of games. You cannot deduce anything from this kind of small sample. What you can say, and it's pretty impressive, is that some teams really prepared for the robo-ump to the extent that they're using the robo-ump for the challenge system. And the Yankees appear to be one of the teams that really know how to do it because they were 5 out of 5, I think, yesterday, which is pretty good.
Pretty good.
Strategically, it can be a big advantage.
The last thing I want to just ask about, I thought just from watching Giancarlo Stanton during the preseason, I thought he was ready to have a big year, and I think he's come out the box looking good. Can he stay healthy? I mean, Howie, what do you think? Well, you're cynical a lot, so we'll give you that, but you don't believe he can.
Before that, I think Jane would appreciate this. If you think about what Aaron Judge has done, if you look at the history of the Yankees, he may be except for Joe DiMaggio, the greatest pure right-handed hitter in Yankee history, because you look throughout their history, it was Babe Ruth, it was Lou Gehrig, left-handed hitter, Don Mattingly, left-handed hitter. Aaron Judge may be the greatest pure right-handed hitter in their history. As far as Stanton goes, we've been waiting for years for him to put that one full year together. I mean, when he hits the ball, it's incredible how hard he hits the ball consistently. He's gotten better with his knowledge of the strike zone. He doesn't chase as badly. He used to be a sucker for that ball low and away. But now he seems to have improved with that a whole lot. And right now he's off to a great start. If he could somehow stay on the field, that's going to be a big right now, boost. I don't like them batting him 5 behind Ben Rice, where they're putting the two lefties together, Bellinger and Rice. Right. Stanton's red hot. Why don't you put him up behind Bellinger and move Rice to 5?
Let's talk about the Queens Mets. They did an overhaul in the offseason, letting Alonso and Diaz walk. I was very concerned about both of those things. They traded McNeil and Nimmo. They jettisoned the entire coaching staff. What do you make of the overhaul and the need for an overhaul when really they only finished one game out of the playoffs last year? I mean, it wasn't great and everybody was upset, but was it a mistake?
I don't know. In their minds, the roster got stale. I think they're rolling the dice in the infield, playing two players at brand new positions. Now, you've seen a little of it immediately with Bichette on that slow roller where an experienced third baseman will field that with his bare hand. He's using the backhand technique and transferring it
without the bare hand.
Without the bare hand, which could cost him on certain players. Now that comes from inexperience. Whether they'll clean that up is another thing. Polanco at first still has to get used to certain things like the pickoff throws and the flip on the 3-1 play. There's things you have to learn that come naturally after a while.
Jane, your thoughts about the overhaul of the Mets?
I do think that the team had gotten stale. I, for the life of me, don't understand, for years, decades, people saying, why do players chase the money? Why don't they stay with a team that produced them, just like Cal Ripken did or Mickey Mantle did? Well, here's Pete Alonso, who wanted to stay. God knows, they would have had to pay the money, but guess who has it? Steve Cohen. And to me, this was, incredible stupidity. Break up the team? Sure. Clearly, there was a problem in the clubhouse between Nimmo and some other guys. People say it might have been political, and McNeil and Lindor didn't get along too well, apparently. Okay, break it up. But don't go out and tell the fans, what we care about starting now is run prevention, and then put 2 members of the infield, Bichette and Polanco, in positions they've never played before. That's crazy.
You're not going to get an argument from me, Jane. I read your book, as I read it, and I had to laugh when I looked at my scorecard from opening day. You wrote in your book about the 3 true outcomes in baseball, and here it was on opening day. We were all excited about Carson Bench. I mean, he certainly looks like a good athlete and a good player. But I noticed on opening day he had 2 walks, 2 strikeouts, and a home run. And when I saw that, I said to myself, this is exactly what Jane Leavy says. Why don't you explain this whole idea about the 3 true outcomes in baseball and your philosophy? And it played out on opening day with a hot young rookie who hit a home run.
Baseball's evolved into a game that is completely opposite what it used to be. Pitchers used to, quote, pitch to contact. A manager or a pitching coach would come out and say, make them hit the ball. Let your fielders do something. Earl Weaver would scream at people to do that, the former Baltimore manager. Now the whole idea is to let them not even touch the ball, to not put the ball in play. In fact, the analytic idea is to limit the chaos of the ball in play, which is crazy. When I told Roger Angel, now passed away, but when I told Roger Angel that was the philosophy, he screamed in pain and said, chaos of the ball in play is what the game is all about. Yeah. And so, yes, it is true. It is easier to score runs with a walk and a home run than it is by bunching singles together. But One, it's not entertaining. Do you bother to look up when there's a home run now? I don't. I mean, there are too many of them at this point. And they, of course, adopted this launch angle swing once the idea of limiting the chaos was formulated by a woman who's now the sports editor of the San Francisco Chronicle. And it was part of this early proto-analytics group at Baseball Reference. Baseball Prospectus, excuse me, which came up with this theory using mathematics to show that the percentages were better. Well, the math is correct, but the problem is the math can't account for everything. And one thing it can't account for is what makes the game interesting. And if you don't put the ball in play, you don't have the chance for great defensive plays. So people stop caring about it. Well, that's as exciting as a home run to me.
You know what's interesting, and it's already come up in this. Number one, we mentioned Jeff McNeil. I think this philosophy is what really hurt McNeil, because he changed his game and he's no longer going to be the leading hitter in baseball. But the other thing, and I told Howie we were going to talk about this, but I didn't tell him what play it was. You wrote a lot in this book about the Jeter tag play when he tagged out Giambi at the plate in Game 3 of the 2001 ALDS. And you said that play that Jeter made could never be made today, even under the same circumstance. I would be curious, and I'm sure Howie would like to hear what you have to say about that, because we all know that amazing moment that Jeter ran across the field, intercepted a relay, and made an incredible, unique, one-of-a-kind play.
What I said, I think, was, Gary, that it couldn't have been made in the era of the shift, the defensive shifts that, along with launch swing and elevating the torque on every part of your body while throwing max heave on every pitch, that the game evolved into. Blessedly, when the Major League Baseball instituted new rules in 23, one of the things they did is prohibit the defensive shifts that allowed managers to play four guys if they wanted to the first base side of second base. And no, he couldn't have made that play with that rule in force. What was significant about that play is not just that he made it, in a critical playoff game where the Yankees were, down 2 games to the Oakland Athletics, the belated Oakland Athletics, but that he showed that he used his mind. Nobody today, they all have little cards in their hats telling them where to stand, what to do. This was a play that was a product of experience and imagination and knowing what his body could do and knowing the stadium and how big the foul space was in that old ballpark, and knowing also that Shane Spencer, who was playing in place of Paul O'Neill,
but you think
might not make the best throw.
But you think that in today's game right now he would not have had the freedom and the context to make that play?
I think Derek Jeter would have declared himself free under any circumstance. But most players today do not. They follow what they're told. The exception that was so glaring and so pivotal last year in the World Series was Mookie Betts instituting a wheel play in the World Series, which is what, basically won it for them.
That's right.
And that's a ball player using his skill and his experience as opposed to numbers. And the problem with numbers, they can tell you what's going to happen 9 times out of 10. They can't tell you the 10th time because it hasn't happened yet.
How are your thoughts just about what you heard there?
It's an interesting point, although I think she's right. He'd still have the freedom to move around the field.
Derek Jeter would have the freedom to do that.
Jane made some good points about how the analytics are based on percentages. I had this argument with David Cohn one time because the analytical people don't believe in the sacrifice or moving a runner to second, with the argument that you don't give up an out. You have a better chance to score with a runner on first with 3 outs to work with instead of 2. But baseball doesn't account for the bloop hit to right field that lands on the line. You make a great pitch, and the guy could still get a bloop hit on the line. or that it only takes a single to score a run from second instead of from first. Most times, occasionally you'll score from first on a single. Here's another thing. 7 out of 10 times you fail. So the percentages are against success.
Anyway,
if you think
that's
about
right.
baseball,
Exactly.
baseball defies the percentages in a lot of ways, and that's what the analytical people fail to realize at times.
You can't measure
Yeah,
luck.
go ahead, Jane.
You can't measure luck. There is no
Right.
algorithm that can tell, Joe Torre or whoever is managing the Yankees at any given time, Aaron Boone, that the sun is going to come out from behind a cloud and shine, let's say, in Willie Davis's eyes, as it did in the Game 6 of
66.
Game 4 of the '66 World Series.
Game 1, yeah.
There's no algorithm that can predict that a pebble is going to interrupt the trip of a ground ball 2 times in the 7th game of the '24 World Series.
Right.
So to me, the problem is the notion that you want to control everything, every outcome, that you can predict it and play, towards controlling everything, is both boring and misguided. We can't control everything. And baseball, more than perhaps any game, shows us that over and over again. And it's the great players who adjust to the unexpected. Look at the play Andy Pages made in center field last year, climbing over the back of Kiki Hernandez. I mean, that's what greatness is.
Or Willie Mays climbing over the back of Bobby Bonds. But that's an entirely different story. When Howie was talking about Bichette playing third base, I had been thinking while watching him, wait till they start bunting on him. But then I realized nobody bunts anymore. You don't have the hit and, I was going to mention when you guys were talking, I was just going to mention the hit and run. Well, I can't even imagine the last time I saw a real successful hit and run. Jane, I want to bring this up and again include Howie in it. One of the themes in your book was stories. You said we need stories, but in this age of analytics, we're not getting the stories. What did you mean by that, and what kinds of things would need to be done to add stories that maybe like we used to have, like Derek Jeter making that kind of a play?
Well, what's happened, I think, is that analytics have successfully severed the storylines that knit baseball together over series and seasons and decades in such a way that it limits, what you want to root for, unless you're a gambler and you're there to root for the next pitch being the curveball that you said the guy was going to throw.
Yeah.
So it used to be a game of matchups. Remember that word, matchups? And you would go to the ballpark because you wanted to see Koufax pitch against Juan Marichal, or you wanted to see whether Greg Maddux could ever get Tony Gwynn out, which he couldn't, because those were things that went on and on and on, and they had to do with human beings and long-told narratives. Well, in a world where a starting pitcher, if he's, the average length of an outing is 5.2 innings, and we're now over 3,000 major leaguers have had Tommy John surgery because they are now trained to throw max heave and with the maximum amount of torque that they can generate on their forearm or an elbow. You can't root for guys who aren't there. So you couldn't root for Cole here.
Well, let me ask you this, and I'll ask you first, Jane, and then I'll ask Howie. So when I was younger, and it's not too long ago, if I had average home runs, RBIs, runs scored, et cetera, I pretty much knew how good a player was. Now there's OPS, OPS plus, WAR, RPBA, which I don't even know what it is. Do you find those helpful every now and then, and any of those categories in helping to evaluate players? Or do you still stick with the old stats like me, an old man, I do?
Well, those old numbers are, what got people into the Hall of Fame, and they're known as black ink as opposed to what exists today. I understand that those numbers, that these guys who create algorithms are really smart, and they really know how to do it, and they really can show and find weaknesses that can be exploited. But the problem is that they don't know the game. A friend of mine who's a head of the sports analytics lab at MIT and who devises things for FIFA and other team sports. She's worked for MLB. So the problem with the analytics and the algorithms is that these guys have no domain knowledge. Domain knowledge meaning they know the math, but they don't know what the math is being applied to. So they don't know why it makes sense.
Just before we run out of time, so they produce the numbers, but they don't know what goes into the people who are using the numbers. Howie, you're a scorekeeper. Do you ever find that some of these numbers are useful, or do you still say to yourself, well, okay, there's wins and losses in ERA and strikeouts, so I know how good a pitcher is?
No, I'm still for the traditional numbers.
You are?
Oh, absolutely. To me, OPS is somebody put two stats together, made an acronym, and then created a stat. I mean, how can you judge if somebody's not a home run hitter? How can you judge their OPS because they don't really slug? The slugging percentage makes up the OPS. Is Tony Gwynn not a great player because maybe he didn't slug as good as maybe Willie Mays or something like that? To me, some of this stuff is ridiculous, and people just make up these numbers. They also don't account for the emotion or swing of a game. The strikeout is like passé nowadays. But when you strike out a guy with a runner on third, 1 out, that's a lift for the defense. They can't account for that in analytics.
And the lift is, of course, something that doesn't isn't quantified, so to speak. It's something that we all talk about, and maybe we notice in the stands or on TV. Listen, we're just about out of time. Jane, what do you think? Dodgers again? You think it's too easy to pick?
Frankly, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to say something horrible. I don't know how Brian Cashman has a job. Okay. He's great at assembling teams that don't quite make it. And I'm sure it's very lucrative. And if you look at the numbers, the Steinbrenner money is not way up there now these days compared to what it was in the old days and compared to other teams. And so they've gotten much more conservative. They don't make the big splash.
All right.
And they don't develop their own players. Other than that, they're perfect.
You want to make a pick, any sort of pick for the end of the season?
It's hard to pick against the Dodgers right now, but you never know, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be rooting against them.
All right. Jane Leavy, thank you so much. Thanks for the great work and the great book. Howie Karpin, thanks for being a friend and everything else. And, folks, we'll see you all next week. Have a good night. Stay here.